Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Let's dive right in because this one I am sharing 3 key tips to get the most out of your study sessions. Now, quite often I get questions around kind of like time management or how to find more time to study, or that's kind of a common problem, right? Of not feeling like there's enough time around the rest of your schedule. If you're working, if you've got a family, to actually find the time for the study sessions. And yes, that is, a problem, right? Like I would always wish for more time to get everything done. And that can feel like one of the biggest problems. But I would invite you to consider what could happen when you maximize the time that you do have available. So, in this episode, I want to talk about the study sessions themselves. Over the course of your qualification, you are going to have to sit down to study hundreds, if not thousands of times. So, if we could improve a few things by a couple of percent in terms of their effectiveness, their efficiency, oh my goodness, that's going to have a mammoth impact, right? On how motivated you feel, how easy it is to sit down and study. There's kind of less resistance. You're going to get more done in those study sessions. You might then not have to study as long in the future. Quite often when I work with students, one of the kind of easier or more obvious transformations is that they don't have to study for as long, which is pretty cool. They, less time each week studying, and then you're probably going to get better grades, right? Because you're moving the needle quicker towards those big assessments. So I want to talk about what you need to do kind of at the start of a study session, and then share something about what you can do in the middle, and then something that you can do at the end to make those study sessions better. But I also want to just signpost you to some other resources that I have first. So I have my study session planners. If you haven't got those yet or seen those, then they are these kind of A4 study planners. There's 7 different versions, and they help you map out a study session, stay productive and focused throughout, and then kind of reflect at the end and just track your progress in a visual way. So there's 7 different versions that you can have a go with. You can print them out and fill them out by hand. I don't have any on me right now, but I quite often will print a whole load and then use them when I really want to get down to some good work. You can also type directly into them. So if you have a tablet or you want to just open them on your laptop, you can use them that way. So I'll pop the links in the episode video descriptions. You can find them if you head to my blog as well, and you can download them for free, and it will help you kind of practice with some of the things I'm going to share in this episode. Okay, so let's think about this first tip of what do you do at the start of a study session to make it better. Before you sit down to study, I really want you to know what you're going to do and why it matters. So rather than thinking, okay, like in a minute, I'm going to go upstairs and sit down and I guess I'll kind of figure out a plan. And sometimes that is, unavoidable in terms of, if you've just started a new module or a new class or a new semester, or you are kind of working out a revision plan, then yes, planning could be a viable activity in itself. But for the most part, if it's like, oh, I'm just going to figure out what I'm going to do today, or I'm going to make a bit of a plan for the week, that I would argue there's difficulty and issues of just sitting down to do that. So rather than like, yeah, I'm going to sit down and then I'm going to figure out what to do, that's where the resistance and the procrastination and the delay can kind of happen. This happens to me quite often if I forget this. I'll sit down in the morning and I'll be like, right, first thing I'm going to do is work out what I'm going to do today. And then I get distracted. I start kind of going into my emails. I start just faffing around. I probably pick up my phone. And then what normally ends up happening is I do eventually start doing something, but it's normally not the thing I should be doing. it's, an easier thing or something that, is important, but it's not really important right now. So I would invite you to kind of see your study space as an action space, right? And see your study time as time to study, not to plan or not to think about studying. So instead, depending on when you study in the day, you can have a think, before I start this session, I'm going to work out what to do. So that could be, over breakfast. You could be thinking, right, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do? Like, what are my study tasks going to be? It might be, if you're working in the day and you're going to study in the evening, it might be that you take one of your breaks at work to just sit and think, right, what am I going to focus on next? What's my next task or my next 3 tasks? And you can write them in your notebook, in a note on your phone, put them on a sticky note and attach them to the inside of your laptop. Or you could also use the time at the end of a study session to plan the next one, which I'll talk about a bit more later in the episode. And so that's one thing of what are you going to work on? But I also want you just to spend literally 20 seconds thinking, why am I doing this task? What's the reason behind it? Because our individual study sessions by themselves don't really kind of move the needle that much, right? You could have the most productive study session ever, and you have not achieved, 1% of your degree. And so we need to start thinking of our study sessions as inching us towards bigger things. And those bigger things are all of your assessments that count towards your final grades. And so rather than thinking, oh yeah, tonight I'm going to do some reading, or I'm going to work on my essay, I want you to get super specific, because if you get super specific, it's easier to just get down to it and not get distracted. It's also easier to hold yourself accountable. Like, it's really obvious if you get to the end of the study session and you didn't do that thing, then you can think, oh yeah, I got distracted, or oh yeah, that thing felt really hard, so I actually ended up doing this thing instead. And you can also, it can help with motivation, because if you know, oh yeah, this evening when I get back from work, I'm going to study for an hour or so, and I'm going to write the introduction for my next essay. And, when I write that introduction, it's going to get the ball rolling. Like, can you see that then feels a lot more focused and aligned with, oh yeah, this smaller task is actually contributing to a much bigger goal. So when you know why you're doing something, it's easier to focus and stay motivated. And yes, it can cut out resistance that might build when a task feels a bit vague or a little bit pointless, and it can stop that feeling of, I spent so long studying and I'm not actually getting anywhere. Okay, so that's your task for at the start of a study session, is do not sit your butt down at that chair. Do not open your laptop or log onto your computer until you know what you are going to be focusing on and why it matters. Okay, so your tip for the middle of your study session, or any point during your study session, is to focus on your process, not the outcome. And so what I mean by that is you cannot control fully what you actually achieve in a study session, right? You could have the best of intentions, right? You've got your to-do list of, yep, this is everything I'm going to get done in this study session. Or, maybe you've got a big study day planned for a Saturday and you're like, yep, I'm going to get all of this done. But that's probably not very realistic. You might be someone like me who is very time positive. I think that I can get so much done with my time, and and it's all optimistic, it's hopeful, it has good qualities to an extent, but it means that if I'm focusing only on my result, I'm disappointed every single time, because I'm like, oh yeah, I did get stuff done and that's great, but I didn't get what I wanted done. But who's to say that I'm an expert in knowing how long something's going to take? And that doesn't take into account how difficult that task is. And even if I've done that task before, things might crop up. I might get tech issues. I might just find a hurdle that I hadn't accomplished, encountered before. You might also, if your tasks are studying, you are learning new material. So sometimes it just doesn't stick. Sometimes you just can't find the right way to say that thing. And that idea of, oh yeah, I'm going to get 500 words written today. Like, who knows? It's kind of setting yourself up for a bit of failure. We don't want to just leave it open to the universe and not really get much done, but there is a much more sustainable, effective way to hone our energy and our attention. Okay, so what I want you to do is focus on your process of studying. And what I mean by that is when after your study session or during your study session, think, am I showing up in the best way? So we all know that we want to try and be as focused as possible during a study session, right? So you can then think to yourself, right, my energy during this study session, my attention is on how can I maintain my focus? So then you start thinking of ways like, okay, maybe I could find a good soundtrack that's going to kind of get my brain into the flow. Okay, maybe, I need to improve my posture somehow. I need to get a cushion for my chair or a footstool because being uncomfortable is actually ruining my focus. Maybe I need a coffee, maybe I need a Diet Coke, maybe I need a snack. Maybe I need noise cancelling headphones. Like, you can start to think that way. Maybe I need to close down my emails or put my phone somewhere else. We can start to think of it like that. There's also this idea of single tasking, multitasking. I am very guilty of that. The impatience of programs or tabs loading. And if you've got a brain that's moving at, 100 miles an hour, that I will find myself not just with loads of tabs open, because sometimes that's useful to, have things there when you need them, but I find myself working in different tabs. And, I'm trying to map out a plan for my next podcast episode. And I'm like responding to some kind of customer service type emails. And then I'm also creating a graphic for the next YouTube video. And I find myself doing that, and it's just not a very efficient use of my time, right? In terms of managing the process, I'm not really managing it that well. So that's where we can start to think, okay, the attention during a study session, in the middle of a study session, is how can I study with the most focus possible? Not 100%, because we don't always have 100%. If I get distracted, can I bring myself back? If I start feeling negative or, doubts or worries hit me, can I say something that's going to help me kind of just get back in the game rather than spiraling? And it might be, sometimes the best thing to do is to take a break. That's why I recommend the Pomodoro method for studying. Some variation of it, study intensely and take breaks. And you can play around with the ratio of that, because you may realize, oh yeah, I actually sat at my desk and I didn't move for like 3 hours. And was that a really good use of your kind of process? Maybe not, because you probably needed a wee for like an hour of that. Your attention span was probably getting less and less and less. Your stress levels were getting higher. And actually what could have worked is, taking a short break and coming back to it. So this idea then is that if you're always judging yourself by how much you get done in a study session, you're often going to feel like you failed. And if that feeling happens session after session of, oh yeah, it was okay, but I didn't really get enough done, that's going to impact your motivation over time. Whereas if after every study session you can think, yeah, my process during that study session, it was like an 8 or a 9. Like, I didn't get as much done as I wanted, but actually my process was really good. And I'm really happy with my study skills and my habits and my routines. Or you might be like, you know what, I didn't get a lot of, like, that much done, but also I was super distracted. I was I was all over the place. Like, I wasn't really studying in the best, most intentional way. That's way more important feedback and useful feedback, because then you can start to think, okay, yeah, next time I'm going to do it this way, or next time I'm going to try this out. So it's kind of more useful feedback that way. Okay. And then the final tip for how to finish strong. So what do you do at the end of a study session or towards the end. And I've got a choice point for you here, because I think there are two great ways to end a study session, and you can try both out to see what works for you. And that's either closing the loop or starting a new one. So the one that seems most common that I see when people are sharing studying advice is closing the loop. So ending your study session, tying it up with a bow. So that means, you get to the end of a task, right? You maybe close all your tabs down, close all your programs down, you tidy your desk, you clear the space physically and mentally so that your next session can feel fresh and focused. And that is a great method for students who really like that sense of completion of like ending a study session with ticking something off, who like to be in control of things, who like clarity, who don't like the idea of like open loops, like to do a task and finish it. So that's great if that works for you. But I would invite you to try this other method and see if it works. And whenever I'm sharing study methods, that's what I want you to kind of be considering of like, oh, let me give that a go, because we may not have stumbled upon the right study method yet. That might be why we're finding things difficult. And also, things change. Like throughout my studies, I definitely changed my viewpoint on things. At times, I liked to handwrite my notes. At other times, I liked to type them. Sometimes I loved studying at my desk. Other times, I did much better out the house or like in the kitchen with someone around me. Like sometimes I would like to be kind of silent. Sometimes I'd like music. Like it's good to experiment. Okay, so the second option then of how to end the study session is to actually start your next study session now. And this is what I like to do. This is my personal favorite. It's also how I like to organize my work days. And it's a little bit more, I guess, unconventional. Now, the reason I love this is because it lowers the resistance next time. So this is good if you are a student who getting started is the worst bit for you, right? You have it kind of almost hanging over you all day of like, oh God, I've got to study later. And you know that it's the bit of getting from the sofa to your desk or from doing something else and watching TV to actually opening your laptop and starting. And like that first kind of like 5, 10, 15 minutes of studying just feels awful. And once you're kind of in, you normally feel better. So this method, it kind of does away with all of that, right? Because you're not starting from scratch. You've already got this foothold into your task, so you can pick up momentum more easily. So how this works is, yes, okay, you might have, finished a task towards the end of your study session, but spend 5-10 minutes setting yourself up or even starting the next one. So if you know that in your next study session, you are going to be kind of reading and taking notes, you might actually open the textbook to that page and like mark where you're going to start. You might open the article if it's an online one. You might set up your note-taking doc, whether that again is handwritten or typed, and actually write the next headings. If you are working on an essay, rather than just kind of opening the essay doc so it's ready, because that's lowered the resistance 2%, let's reduce it way more and actually start. So if you know that you're going to write your next paragraph, and in that paragraph you need to summarize the strengths of a certain theory, right? You've probably got your notes around you before, like that's definitely what I'd recommend. I never recommend just trying to write from scratch and going and finding notes and just adding them in. I don't recommend that as a method. I always recommend finding all of your material first and working out what those arguments are going to be and then writing, but that's by the by. So if you've already got some notes of, oh yeah, there's like 3 or 4 key strengths of this theory, like what if you just jotted them down as bullet points, right? What if you gave yourself a sentence starter, right? There are 4 key strengths to theory X. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, lastly, and then just put in like the roughest notes ever what they are. So then can you see that you've like left these breadcrumbs for your future self? When you then log in the next day or whenever the next study session is, you literally know exactly what you're going to do, and it's already started, right? You've got that sentence starter, you've got that first bullet point. You literally just have to go to your notes and write that first point. You've already gained momentum, right? This is why it feels so hard to get started on things. Like when if you were going to kind of push, if you were going to try and push a car down the road, getting it moving, getting it started moving is the hardest bit. And then once it's gained momentum, then it's a lot easier to push it down the road. So this is a study strategy that can kind of remove that bit of, you're already in the flow of your study session. So why not just have the final 5-10 minutes setting yourself up for the next one, because you're already in momentum, you're already moving. And then that next one, baby, you just come on in there and get going. Another thing you could do as well is, if you like to listen to study music, then you could actually get that ready, right? Open Spotify, find the next soundtrack that you want to listen to, get the headphones out. Like, I love listening to study music. I share different soundtracks that I'm listening to in my email newsletter. And I know that sometimes if I'm feeling the resistance and a little bit procrastinatey when it comes down to sitting down to get stuff done at my desk, I'll spend the first 20 minutes looking for a soundtrack, trying out different ones, switching between them. That's not very good use of my time, is it? So again, it's something you can do before. You can do it at the end of the study session in preparation for the next one. So there's my 3 tips for you. Let me just recap those. So at the start of a study session, before you sit down, make sure you know what you're doing and why it matters. Then during your study session, in the middle, I want you to focus on controlling your process rather than the outcome. Focus on, how can I study in the most efficient and effective way right now? And then the result, the outcome, that'll take care of itself. And then the third tip is to finish strong, either by closing the loop so you have a fresh start during your next study session, or opening the next loop so that the resistance is lower during your next study session. So that's just one kind of, a few small changes that you can make to actually start, work through, and finish your study sessions in a way that feels better, right? You're going to get more done in less time. And this is kind of my approach that I try to weave into everything I do, right? In my podcast episodes, in my trainings. And I recommended at the beginning of the episode my study planners, if you want to have a go with them, because they kind of help you do this. They give you the prompts and the structure to manage your study time in that way. And then also, by the time this episode comes out, hopefully, I'm committing to this, there will already be my first study with me video live on YouTube, which is where you get to come along and study with me helping you kind of stay productive, stay accountable. I'm working on it now. So by the time this podcast episode comes out, the study with me video should be there as well. And that's my plan of creating a few of those. And yeah, just seeing how I can support you to make the most out of your study time. Because as I mentioned, there is so many study sessions that you have to do between here and getting your dream qualification. And if we can improve those study sessions by 5%, 10%, if we can make them more efficient, more effective, if we can make it easier for you to actually sit down and do those study sessions and make it happen, then, like I said, the results will take care of themselves. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.